This show is produced by the Hartman Media Company. For more information and links to all our great podcasts, visit hartmanmedia.com.
Speakers, publishers, consultants, coaches, and info marketers unite. The Speaking of Wealth Show is your roadmap to success and significance. Learn the latest tools, technologies, and tactics to get more bookings, sell more products, and attract more clients. If you're looking to increase your direct response sales, create a big-time personal brand, and become the go-to guru, the Speaking of Wealth Show is for you. Here's your host, Jason Hartman.
Hey, it's my pleasure to welcome Gregory Galant, co-founder and CEO of Muck. He is co-founder of the Shorty Awards, and previously Greg was an associate producer at CNN, but back in 1996, he founded HailNet, an award-winning internet strategy firm, when he was in high school. Very impressive. Greg, welcome. How are you?
I'm great. It's good to be here.
Good to have you on the show. So, every business, every professional, every solopreneur, it is one of their big goals to learn how to pitch the media, how to get publicity for their business. Share some of the secrets with us, if you will.
Yeah, so, there's a lot that goes into telling your story to the media and pitching journalists. But I think coming to it, a lot of people view it as this big mystery and think that you need to be a, professional or in some secret club to do it effectively. But the truth is, and we get to see it because we sell Muck, a PR software platform where our customers range from huge Fortune 500s like Nike and the biggest PR firms in the world like Edelman, all the way down to small companies. But we see, in reality, like most of the time people pitching stories, they don't come to it having some long, deep relationship with the journalist, and there is no secret club. So it really just comes down to empathy and being able to see things from the other person's side. So where a lot of entrepreneurs and solopreneurs and people like myself who are like obsessed with our own idea and think what we're working on is just the best thing in the world. To us, what we're doing is just so obviously important that everyone should get it.
I detect the sarcasm. But every entrepreneur has to think that way. You've got to think that way. Because if you're not on a mission and you don't think you have a real cause, you'll never get any attention, will you?
Yeah, 100%. You have to be driven and always believe, your baby is the prettiest, smartest one in the world. But then you also always have to be testing your material. It reminds me like if you ever watch anything about like how stand-up comics do their material, they'll write a joke and they think it's the best joke in the world. And even the biggest stand-up comics, and even Jerry Seinfeld or Chris Rock, before they go tell their joke to the room of 1,000 people or go on Leno, not Leno anymore, but, go on TV, go on Fallon and tell their joke. They pop into a small comedy club in New York City and tell that joke to 30 people to see if anyone will laugh, to see if it's any good. And we have to think the same way as entrepreneurs, where we have our idea, we think it's the best idea in the world. But we have to figure out, one, is it newsworthy? And then two, even if it is, how do you tell it in a way that's newsworthy? Or how do you promote the right angle of it that is newsworthy? So you have to kind of get out of your own head and go from thinking like, hey, I'm launching this software product. It's amazing because it helps, this professional do their job 10% more efficient. Like, that's great, but that's not a news story. What might make it a news story is that like, hey, my software enabled this person to take an extra week off of work, or this really quirky feature that we launched in a new way, or the fact that we let our employees work from home whenever they want. So you have to, step out of why it's amazing to you and think, could you actually imagine there being a news story about this thing? And what are you doing that's new? What are you doing that's interesting?
Do you believe in so-called publicity stunts?
It depends on the stunt. I think that there are definitely stunts that can work. I mean, you just look at someone like Richard Branson, who's, a master at dramatizing what he does. So there are elements for that. I think for solopreneurs, you have to, I don't know that that's how I would start in PR. I think it might be better to kind of start with the basics and then play with the stunts once you've kind of gotten to a bit more mastery of it. But there's definitely potential for that.
What are the basics?
There are a few elements. One is finding the right journalist to pitch. That's super important because you pitch the wrong journalist, then not only will they ignore you, but you'll kind of expend some of your reputation. So the key to that is looking at what the journalists are writing and tweeting. So let's say you've got a new iPhone app coming out that helps people, meditate and reduce their stress, right? So you don't want to just pitch any tech journalist without reading their stuff, because there might be one tech journalist who only writes about enterprise B2B software, another tech journalist who only covers new hardware coming out. So, in that case, you'd want to read people's past stories and say, hey, who covered other iPhone apps? Who else has written about technology and meditation? Actually read the articles and, get a sense for how they cover it, what angles they're interested in. Read their tweets and get a sense for it. And then once you do that, you can build up a list of the perfect journals to pitch. I should warn, kind of plug, Muck makes that all really easy. That's our software. But even if you don't buy our software, you can just do that by reading the news, searching Google News, doing it. It's a little more work, but that's what you got to do is figure out the right journals first. Then you've got to build a relationship and reach out. So if you're in a time crunch, you can just email them. The better thing to do is to first follow the journalists on Twitter. I should say journalists love Twitter, even if you personally don't like Twitter and love your LinkedIn and Instagram and all that. Journalists, when we poll them, over 80% prefer Twitter to any other social network, and they're on it all the time. So start building a relationship with the journalists, follow them on Twitter, retweet, favorite their stuff so they start to know who you are. But do not pitch them on Twitter. They like to build a relationship. They generally, unless they say otherwise, don't like being pitched on Twitter. Mm-hmm. So think of Twitter like the cocktail party. You want to get to know them there. You want to get them to know your name, but you don't want to actually make a pitch there.
Okay.
And then when it comes time to pitch, find their email and send them an email. And this is where a lot of people go wrong, because they hear from some old PR news that you got to write a press release and, some awkward 500-word document telling your story. And then you try to email that to the journalist. And that's kind of old news. That's how people did PR 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, when you email the journalist, you want to make it short. In our surveys, again, over 90% of journalists want that pitch in under 3 paragraphs. None of them want 500 words.
Right.
And the key is you want to show that you're personalizing it to them, that you've read their past stuff, write about something you read of theirs and show that this email is just for them. Because if they think you're sending the same email to 20 other journalists, mm-hmm. they're going to hate you because every journalist wants a scoop. So the second they think other people are getting it, they realize it's not special to them.
So do any software tools work for PR? I mean, it sounds like you're saying don't use the mass distribution platforms, maybe even don't do news releases at all. There's a distinction here, right? There's news releases, and then there are direct email services, like Cision has and so forth, right? And many other companies. Don't use those or do use them? Or is there any software tool that can help you scale this stuff? Because there's just an endless number of media outlets. So, it sounds great to say, hey, personalize your pitch and this and that, but how can you do it? That would require so much resources to sort of follow them, read all their stuff. There's just so many media outlets out there, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's kind of the evolution. So like you said, you can release a press release, which I can spend a whole 20 minutes on that, but that has very little impact nowadays and is kind of antiquated. You could use a legacy media database, like as you mentioned, Cision, where you send the exact same message to hundreds of people. And that
or thousands.
Or thousands, yeah. And that can really hurt you now because, one, it won't be effective because the journalists know that it's not exclusive to them. And then 2, the journalists are now tweeting screenshots of bad pitches they get. Mm-hmm. So it can actually hurt your reputation. So actually, that's why we built Muck. So the workflow we believe in is, our thing is instead of getting a press list of 500 people or of 5,000 people and spamming them, our idea is you don't want to pitch one person either. Like you say, you got to pitch more people. But it should be more like find 20 journalists and pitch them who are perfect for it rather than 2,000 journalists who won't care. And then what we've done is we've worked out this workflow so you can set up a template of your pitch because, 75% of the pitch will be the same to everybody you pitch, the meat of what your story, is about. And 25% of it should be customized for the person's outlet based on the journalist's interests so that you can kind of morph it and show that journalist why it matters. So the workflow we've built is to let you search. First of all, we built a search engine that has a database with emails of every journalist out there. And then we index everything they write and tweet about. So you could type in, let's say in my example, meditation app. You'll see very quick, like, hey, here's a journalist that wrote 10 articles about meditation apps, and you can click off and read them all. Add that person to your media list, set up your template pitch, and set that to go out to all the 20 journalists you found. But then you can click into each one and easily customize it. So that way you can customize a line or two so it feels very special to the journalist. And you can send it. And this is very important. When we send it, we integrate with your email. So it comes from your own email. So to the journalist, it looks like a one-to-one email. Whereas the second the journalist smells like, oh, I'm on a mass distribution list, that email is going to trash.
Sure, yeah. Okay, good. So you said that as far as your service, Muck, it's used by small businesses and very large, Fortune 500 type businesses. How much does it cost? Give us some idea as to, what it costs for people.
Yeah, we don't publish the price. We have a team that'll work on a quote for each person. But I can say, for a small business, it's a fraction of the cost of even what the salary would be for a junior PR person. And so, the way to think about it is if you have anybody on your team spending any amount of time doing PR, this will make them just so much more effective. The one warning I'll give, though, is that if you're a one-person shop and you want to buy our software and any others, or any other out there, that's fine. To be successful, you still have to be willing to put at least, maybe 2 or 3 hours a week into doing your PR, because we'll make you a lot more effective. But like I said, it's similar to sales, where like you could buy the best CRM in the world or the best sales software in the world, but if you don't spend any time selling, you're not going to sell anything. It's the same with PR, where use our software, you'll be, at least twice as effective as if you don't. But you still have to put in those couple of hours a week to actually reach out to the journalist, converse with the journalist, build the relationship with the journalist if you want to start seeing returns.
All right. What else should we know? Maybe a question I haven't asked you, or just anything you want to share with the audience?
Another thing I would think about for people out there, and I know a lot of your audience are infopreneurs and people who have a public profile, but you should think about inbound PR too, because everything we talked about right now is you going out to pitch the journalist. But a lot of times the journalist is in a crunch, they need a source, and they're not going to have time, you're not going to happen to pitch them on it. So again, put yourself in the journalist's shoes. What would you do if you had to write a story and you needed a source and you had no time? You'd Google, right? Like everybody else, and you'd see like who looks credible. So, I'd really encourage everyone to think a lot about how your presence comes across on social media, on your Twitter, on your LinkedIn, on your personal site. Another big key is to make it really easy to contact you or email you. And then if a journalist emails you, be it inbound or because you pitched them, respond fast. This is another thing where it's like, to us business people, our time horizon is usually we get things done in a week, in a month. To journalists, they're often under deadline. Many of them procrastinate, so they've got like 2 hours to file the story. So if they know there's a source that always gets back to them with a good quote in an hour, that's the source they're going to go to. They're not going to go to the guy who takes a week to get back to them and schedule a phone call.
Right. Yeah. Okay, good. All right, keep going. Anything else there?
Yeah, so, again, have a good headshot ready, have your bio out there. You want to make it clear that you've been quoted other places and that you're credible. And if you've written a book, make it clear, especially if you got a publisher to write your book. I'm not saying it's good to use publishers necessarily, but it adds credibility for journalists. make all that clear because, you just want to show really quickly you're a credible source. And then when it comes to your quotes, also really think about being quotable, or as Shaquille O'Neal said, quotatious, where you want to boil. Yeah, I thought it was a perfect way to put it. He started using that when he was one of the first people to get on Twitter. And I remember when we started the Shorty Awards, he was actually one of the first people to make a speech there, which we were very grateful. But this idea of being quotatious, where we could all say things in a lot of words, and if we're book authors, and we obviously have, but the journalist, even if you talk to a journalist for an hour, I know so many entrepreneurs where they're mortified because they talk to the journalist for an hour, all they get is a 10-word quote or a 5-word quote. If they're lucky, they sometimes don't get quoted at all. So, you have to remember, no matter how much you talk to a journalist, if they're writing a 500-word story and it's well-researched, at most you're going to get 1 or 2 quotes. So if you take paragraphs and paragraphs to make all your points, they're not going to quote you. There's nothing to pull out. So, boil down your message to a couple good catchphrases, and that'll go a long way with the journalists, because they'll just hear that and they'll be like, that's perfect. I'm going to use that in my article. Now I've got a great angle to it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Can you give us any examples of creativity that other clients of yours or just anybody in the public eye, or the now public eye, maybe I should say, have used to get media attention? Just any kind of creative things, because you talked earlier about, looking for the newsworthy angle. And a lot of times that's very unapparent, isn't it? It's very, especially when you're close to your business, it's sort of hard to see, well, what's really newsworthy about you, And there's always an angle, isn't there? You really need to be pretty creative to kind of think of those angles, I believe. What do you think?
That's a great point. And, in terms of like some examples that we've seen, I mean, one of my favorites was one of our customers, which is a PR agency that works with a lot of startups. They had a client that made boxed wine. Mm-hmm. And so it was challenging because you pitched the wine reporters on it,
and
the
thinking,
wine critics on it.
I'm not going to cover cheap box wine. That's tacky, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, compared to good wine, it tastes awful. I mean, I'm not a wine connoisseur, but so what they figured out was that like there are a lot of journalists who don't cover wine, but most journalists, they don't have, they're not making a tremendous amount of money. So there are a lot of journalists out there who actually like boxed wine. So they searched, using Muck, they searched for which journalists tweeted that they liked boxed wine that were not wine journalists, that by day covered something else. Mm-hmm. And then they reached out to all the journalists and they were just like, we're going to send you a box of wine. And that journalists were like, heck yeah, that sounds great. Mm-hmm. And so they got a bunch of coverage from these journalists who normally would have never written about wine, but happened to love boxed wine. And we're more than delighted when somebody reached out to them with the box of wine for them to sample and try.
Funny. Yeah. Okay. So that's pretty specific. I mean, any other thoughts on, say someone who's an expert, a guru, a speaker, a thought leader type of person? There's so many of those people out there in every field under the sun. How can they stand out? What will make them distinct? Or, is there a publicity stunt, quote unquote, or something that they can use?
Yeah, there's a few different tactics I've seen work. One is, again, to this idea of being quotatious, find a dramatic way to get your point across. Like one of my favorite examples was the CEO of one of the companies that does estimated audience measurement, similar to Nielsen, where, there's always this debate about they have a small sample size of the audience, and they use that to extrapolate what everyone's doing.
Right.
And it's hard to get that message across to journalists that we're not totally accurate, but this is using sampling is the best thing we can do. And I could make a very long argument for that, but I thought the CEO is brilliant where he boiled it down to just, if you don't believe in sampling, then next time you go to the doctor and he needs a blood sample, ask him to take all your blood. And it's just like, bam, like you could quote that. Right. All of a sudden, this big complex idea of like why sampling is the best thing you could have is made really dramatic. Yeah. So, one is do that. Another, if you want to stand out, we get a reputation for being quotable, reach out to the journalist, offer these quotes, get back to them quickly, show them that you're credible. Invest time into building the relationship with journalists too. So, one thing you can do is, again, knowing that, there's an infinite number of experts out there, but the journalists are people. So, I would definitely recommend trying to meet them. Like, that sets you apart quite a bit. Right. And one thing you can do is, a lot of journalists happen to be based in New York. So if you're not in New York, take a trip to New York once a year and email them again, one-on-one, saying, hey, I follow you on Twitter. I know you write about the thing I'm an expert on. I'm going to be in town these dates. Can I come by and get coffee? Happy to come to the newsroom or meet you at a coffee shop near your office.
Yeah, right.
And just get to know them, try to get their cell number in the process and start texting with them, or follow each other on Twitter, and then you can DM with them. But, I think you bring up a good point that if you're an expert, you don't have a company, your only claim to fame is being an expert, that you have to, the relationship and getting that journalist to trust you that you're an expert, and that also, you're going to be honest with them. You're going to get back to them really quickly. You're going to get them great quotes when they need it, is going to be a thing that will make them rely on you over all the other experts.
Sure. Yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff. Give out your website. Tell people where they can find out more.
My website, muckrack.com, muckrack.com. There's also the Shorty Awards, SHORTY awards.com. And then me personally, I'm just at Gregory on Twitter and Instagram.
Greg, thanks again for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.